I swore I'd never tell anyone what happened that night, but the guilt has been eating me alive. My family still believes the lie I created, and if they knew the truth, they'd never look at me again. Welcome to Reddit Toxic Family Telltales channel. New episode every day. Let me tell you about the absolute worst wedding I've ever been dragged into. And no, I wasn't a guest. I wasn't even supposed to be anywhere near that place. I was just the poor fool my drunk boss begged to deliver a 3-tier cake that could probably crush a small child if it tipped over. He slurred something about how this couple was lawsuit happy and had already threatened to take him to court over a cake tasting. You have to make it perfect, he insisted. Easy for him to say, when I'm the one who usually hides in the back kitchen away from people. But I didn't have much of a choice. So there I was, pulling into the venue with this massive cake wobbling in the back of my van. Before I even killed the engine, I could hear the chaos, screaming, yelling, voices overlapping. Through the windows, I saw the bride in her gown shrieking at someone, the groom storming off with his arms flying in the air. Not exactly the happily ever after moment, right? I sat in my van for a solid 5 minutes, just gripping the steering wheel, telling myself maybe things would calm down. They didn't. They got louder. A centerpiece went flying against the wall. Great. I had less than 20 minutes to get that cake set up before we'd end up in court. So I slipped in through the service entrance, praying no one would notice me. The kitchen staff looked like they'd just been told the world was ending. One server was straight up crying. I pushed the cake cart through, trying to blend into the wall. The cake table was smack in the middle of the reception hall, and of course it was ground zero for the family meltdown. The groom was red-faced, shouting at his mother. His mother was screaming at the bride's mother. The bride? She was sobbing so hard her bridesmaids had to circle around her like a human shield. And me? I'm stuck holding a 3-tier cake whispering, "Excuse me," into a void of absolute chaos. No one even noticed. The fight spiraled, something about a speech, something about half the guests leaving. I tried to inch around them with the cake when suddenly the best man, sloshed out of his mind, grabbed my shoulder and asked if I thought the groom was overreacting. "Buddy, I don't even know your names." I just shook my head and tried to roll away, but he followed me, rambling about how the bride was cheating with her personal trainer. Oh yeah, real uplifting conversation for me while I'm juggling a cake. Finally, I reached the table and started transferring each tier, hands shaking like I was defusing a bomb. Behind me, the bride's sobs turned into screams. Something about the groom's secretary. Then shatter. A champagne flute exploded against the wall just feet from me, tiny shards bouncing onto the white tablecloth. My stomach dropped. If any of that glass got into the cake, we could lose our business license. My fingers trembled as I picked shards off the table with tweezers. As if I didn't already have enough stress, the photographer swooped in, barking at me to move the cake to better lighting. "Lady, this isn't a photo shoot, it's a battlefield." I told her it was already assembled, I couldn't move it. She argued anyway while, behind us, the bride and groom's fight crept closer. Then, the groom knocked over the gift table. Presents everywhere. The bride screamed that the wedding was over and started clawing at her own dress like she was about to rip it apart. I had just finished the cake and was backing away when the maid of honor, red-faced, mascara everywhere, latched onto me, sobbing into my shirt about her non-refundable dress. I tried to peel her off, but she clutched fistfuls of my uniform like I was her lifeline. Meanwhile, the groom had picked up a chair over his head, the bride was pelting him with her bouquet like it was dodgeball, and the DJ thought it was a good idea to play music. That only made it worse, because apparently it was their song. The bride collapsed on the floor wailing, the groom dropped the chair, and for a second I thought, maybe, just maybe, things would settle. Nope. As I tried to sneak out, the mother of the bride blocked me, demanding to know if the cake was gluten-free because her sister was celiac. I stammered that I just delivered it, but she ramped up into full hysteria, shrieking about attempted murder. Behind her, the wedding party had split into 2 sides, screaming like rival gangs. Even the flower girl got in on it. She hurled her basket at the ring bearer, who retaliated by chucking the pillow. The rings went flying under a table somewhere. I thought maybe I could just escape, but when I got outside, my van was trapped by catering trucks and a limo sprawled across the service road. Fantastic. I went back in and ran right into the officiant, who grabbed me by the arm and asked if I'd witnessed the vows, because he needed to know if the marriage was legally binding before they divorced. "Sir, is this really the time?" The parents were now threatening each other with lawyers. The bride and groom suddenly stopped screaming at everyone else and turned together toward the cake. Relief washed over me, maybe the cake could save the day. Wrong. They scrutinized it like they were judges on a reality show. The bride said the roses were the wrong shade of pink. The groom pulled out a tape measure, or maybe just his eyes, and swore the tiers weren't even. And then they both looked at me. Something shifted in their faces. Like they'd found a common enemy. "You," the bride hissed, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "You ruined everything." The groom stepped forward, gripping a champagne bottle by the neck. "She's right. None of this started until you showed up." I froze, backing into the cake table as the two of them advanced. The groom raised the bottle and suddenly, every eye in the room was on me. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone. The bride lunged, grabbing my arm while the groom circled to block my exit. Desperate, I pulled out my phone and started snapping photos of the cake, flash blinding the room, documenting every perfect rose, every straight tear. Proof that this cake was flawless. "Stop." The bride screeched, lunging for my phone. I twisted away, snapping photos as I backed around the table. The groom tried to grab it too, but I shoved the phone in my pocket and bolted for the kitchen. The venue coordinator was near the service door, frantically screaming into her phone about insurance. I waved the delivery form at her, begging her to take it, but she ignored me. The paper crumpled in my sweaty fist. I called my boss, he answered on the fifth ring, drunk and laughing in some bar. I told him they were blaming me, that there were threats, that I was scared, and he just slurred, "No refunds," before hanging up. I barely had time to process before a guest shoved her phone in my face, recording me like I was some villain. She narrated into the camera about the worst cake delivery ever while following me around. My stomach twisted thinking this video might end up online, tanking the bakery's reputation, even though none of this was my fault. Behind her, one of the servers tried picking up broken glass, and then cried out in pain. Blood spilled across the white tablecloth just a few feet from the cake. And that's when I realized, things were about to get even worse. Alright, buckle up, because if you thought the first part was chaotic, what happened next pushed the whole night into complete madness. The server who had cut his hand was still dripping blood everywhere, and my stomach clenched because I knew, if even one drop touched the cake, it was game over for the bakery. I snatched napkins from the bar and sprinted toward him, trying to press them into his hand and keep him away from the cake table. But the blood kept soaking through, spilling onto the floor. My chest tightened, one wrong step, one wrong drop, and our business could be shut down. That's when the venue coordinator stormed back in, eyes wide. She saw the bleeding server standing dangerously close to the cake and immediately pointed at me. "Move it. Move the cake now, it's a liability," she shrieked. I stammered that moving an already assembled three-tier cake was basically suicide. It would collapse under its own weight. She didn't care. She kept threatening to call the police if I didn't move it. Before I could stop her, she grabbed the table and yanked. I lunged forward, gripping the other side to keep it steady. The cake wobbled like a skyscraper in an earthquake, frosting cracking along the second tier. My heart was in my throat. And then it got worse. The groom broke away from his groomsmen and charged straight at the cake, hands outstretched like he was going to strangle it. His buddy barely managed to tackle him in time, but not before his fingertips smeared a streak of frosting down the bottom tier. I swear my vision went white-hot. I threw myself between him and the cake as he fought against his friends, screaming that he'd destroy it and make me pay for his ruined wedding. I didn't even have time to breathe before the bride's mother appeared inches from my face, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Those roses are salmon, not pink. Refund. Now." She shoved her phone practically up my nose, snapping close-ups while rattling off every review site she planned to destroy us on. Her hands shook with rage as she started typing her first one-star review right in front of me. As if on cue, the photographer materialized on my other side, grabbing my sleeve. "Move the cake to the light or I'll tag your bakery in every negative post I make," she hissed, yanking on my arm while the coordinator kept tugging the table the opposite direction. It felt like I was being ripped apart. The bleeding server staggered closer, clutching his soaked napkins. I froze as a single drop of blood fell, splattering onto the tablecloth just an inch from the cake stand. My heart stopped. I dove forward with more napkins, covering it before anyone noticed, but in the scramble I bumped into the bride's mother. She let out a piercing shriek. "He assaulted me. I'm calling the police," and immediately dialed 911. At that exact moment, the groom broke free again. He lunged for the cake, but the best man tackled him. They crashed into the gift table, presents exploding across the floor, glass shattering inside the boxes. The DJ cranked the music up to full blast, trying to drown out the screaming. But all it did was add a deranged soundtrack to the nightmare. The bride ripped off her veil and hurled it at me like a weapon. "You destroyed my life," she screamed. I couldn't help thinking, how had this all turned on me? Just 10 minutes ago they were ready to murder each other. Now suddenly I was the villain? The flower girl broke down again, sobbing and throwing flower petals like confetti grenades at anyone nearby. I tried to slip toward the exit, but I was surrounded, angry guests circling me, phones raised, recording every second. My shirt was soaked through with sweat, the maid of honor's snot and tears still clinging to me, and now blood stains. I looked like I'd been through a war zone. And yet the cake still stood. Perfect, unbroken, like the last untouched monument in the middle of an apocalypse. That's when the double doors flew open. Security guards rushed in, followed by uniformed police. An officer raised his hand, voice booming, "Nobody leaves until we get statements." My knees went weak. My van was blocked anyway, but now I was truly trapped. The cops started taking names. I edged toward one, desperate, asking if they could move the limo blocking the service road. He didn't even look at me, just lifted a finger for silence. My chest tightened, the walls felt like they were shrinking around me. The bride's mother was already screaming at the officer about false imprisonment. The groom's father bellowed that he'd call the mayor himself. Guests pressed closer, phones still out, narrating their own live coverage of the disaster. Finally, I managed to tap the officer's shoulder. "Please, can someone just move the limo?" I begged. He shook his head. "No vehicles move until the investigation's done." I wanted to scream. Instead, I swallowed it down and tried to breathe. The kitchen staff poked their heads out, their faces lit with relief at the sight of police. The head server grabbed my arm, dragging me back toward the kitchen. She jabbed a finger at the cake. "The reception's ruined anyway, just cut it now." I shook my head. My job's delivery, not serving. Her eyes narrowed. "So the cake just goes to waste? Useless." She stormed off, cursing under her breath. As if that wasn't enough, the best man stumbled back over to me, reeking of whiskey, a fresh drink sloshing in his hand. He leaned in, slurring about how the groom had been sleeping with his secretary for months, but hey, it was fine because the bride was cheating too. He laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world, while my skin crawled. I tried to step away, but he followed, insisting everyone knew except the couple themselves. Across the room, someone else was holding their phone high, live streaming. My heart dropped as I heard them say, loud enough for the whole hall, "The wedding planner ruined everything." Here she is. They spun the camera on me. The comments on their screen started flying, angry faces, blaming me. I waved my hands desperately, shouting, "I'm just the cake delivery person." But the feed kept rolling, the mob mentality snowballing. That's when the flower girl and ring bearer ran up, holding something shiny. My stomach sank. The wedding rings. They'd found them under a table and, for reasons I'll never understand, gave them to me. The bride's father spotted it and roared, "He stole the rings." The groom's mother jumped in, shrieking she'd seen me lurking near the gift table earlier. Suddenly, all the phones swung toward me again. My face burned as I tried to explain, holding up the rings. The kids gave them to me. No one listened. I panicked, set the rings down on the nearest table and backed away. That's when I noticed it. The cake was leaning. The table had shifted, one leg shorter than the rest. The tiers tilted dangerously. Gasps rose from the crowd as I dove to the ground, stuffing napkins under the table leg. I braced the wobbling cake with both hands. For one terrifying second I thought it would go, but then miraculously it steadied. And you could feel it. Disappointment. People actually wanted it to fall. The coordinator reappeared, finally shoving the delivery paperwork in my face. She signed it, but scrawled a long note about an incident during delivery. I didn't care. At that point I just wanted to escape. I grabbed the form and headed for the exit. But before I could make it, the bride blocked the doorway, mascara streaked, clutching her stomach. "Your cake made me sick," she groaned. I blinked. "No one's eaten it. The smell alone is poisoning me." She shrieked. Her bridesmaids formed a wall, nodding furiously. One claimed she felt dizzy just looking at the frosting. Another insisted it looked contaminated. I tried to push through, but they shoved back, trapping me again. And then, like some twisted nightmare, the groom staggered over, still clutching that champagne bottle, swaying on his feet. He headed straight for the cake. I abandoned my escape attempt and planted myself between him and the table. He tried circling around me, but I kept blocking him, heart pounding. That cake was the only proof of my innocence, and if he smashed it, I was done. Finally, he gave up and stumbled to the bar. Just as I let out a shaky breath, the officer returned, notepad out. "Your statement," he said flatly. I poured everything out, how I was only delivering a cake, how I'd been caught in the crossfire. He scribbled it down, but the families kept butting in. She was late. The bride screamed. "Wrong flavor." The groom shouted. None of it was true. I shoved the delivery slip in the officer's face, pointing at the timestamp. He checked it against the venue's security log, confirmed I was on time. The bride's mother lunged, snatching the paper, claiming it was forged. The officer calmly pried it out of her hands and told her to stand down. By then, more police had arrived, separating the families like rival gangs, bride's side on one end of the hall, groom's on the other. And me? I was stuck right in the middle. Trapped. Nowhere to go. And the cake still standing. The head of security finally stepped up, his voice booming through the chaos. They'd be reviewing the surveillance footage. Just like that, the entire hall went eerily silent. Every scream, every accusation, every thrown bouquet or toppled chair suddenly meant something very real. It was all on camera. The venue coordinator leaned in close to me and whispered that the cameras had caught everything, including the fight that started it all. My eyes flicked to the bride and groom, standing on opposite ends of the room, glaring across the battlefield like rival generals. For half a heartbeat I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd come to their senses. But no. They both pulled out their phones and started texting furiously, jaws tight, faces pale. Not reconciliation, lawyers. And then it happened. The groom, still clutching that half-empty champagne bottle, stumbled backward. He collided with the cake table. Time slowed. The bottle tipped forward and golden liquid poured out, splattering across the bottom tier. My stomach dropped as the champagne soaked into the pristine white fondant, spreading like an ugly bruise across the once perfect cake. I scrambled for napkins, blotting furiously, but the damage spread faster than I could control. The fondant went soft, sticky, collapsing under the stain. Heart hammering, I bolted through the service entrance, sprinted to the van, and grabbed my emergency decorating kit. By the time I got back, the damage had deepened, but I had one last shot. I squeezed out white icing from a tube, smoothed it over the stain with my spatula, and blended the edges as best I could. Behind me, the room was still chaos, shouting, sobbing, phones recording. I tuned it all out, hands steady, finishing the repair. From a few feet away, you couldn't even tell. Unless you knew, it looked fine. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from my boss, "Why the hell are you still there? Delivery takes 20 minutes. My chest tightened. I typed back that the police had locked down the venue, but he shot back, "Liar. Every extra minute, I dock from your pay." Then another text, "You better not have damaged the van or eaten any samples in the back." I wanted to smash my phone against the wall. Instead, I remembered, we kept standard delivery contracts in the van's glove box, just for disasters like this. The lot was still clogged, but I squeezed between catering trucks and dug out the contract. There it was, highlighted in yellow, the liability clause. Once delivered and set up, damage was the client's responsibility. I took photos, then grabbed the signed slip from that morning when the bride's mother picked up the topper. Proof. The venue coordinator appeared at my elbow, frazzled and pale. "We need the cake in storage. Police need this space clear. Can you help?" My stomach nodded. The cake was 3 stacked tiers of fragile sugar engineering, heavy as bricks. One bump and it was over. But if I refused? They'd pin the blame on me anyway. We found a rolling cart in the kitchen, and with her holding one side, I carefully slid the cake board onto it. The wheels squeaked as we pushed it across the wreckage of what used to be a wedding reception. Chairs overturned, glass crunched underfoot, and at one point we had to squeeze between the two mothers, now locked in their own screaming match about whose family was more dysfunctional. When the cart jolted over the ridge where the carpet met the tile, the middle tier lurched dangerously to the side. I lunged forward, both hands bracing the cake, easing it back into place. A visible crack split the icing where the tiers had shifted. My chest burned as I patched it with extra icing, smoothing with my fingertip. You could still see the scar if you looked too close. But the cake lived. The storage room was cramped, smelled of bleach and lemon cleaner, but at least it was safe. No champagne bottles, no fists, no flying bouquets. I snapped photos from every angle, the timestamps proof that the cake was mostly intact when I left it. Evidence. That's when a weary police officer found me, notebook in hand. He asked for my statement. I stuck to the bare facts: delivery, setup, fight, chaos. He scribbled it all down, sighing like he'd seen 100 wedding disasters before. Venue'll probably press charges, he muttered. I gave him my contact information. He nodded, saying insurance and lawyers would definitely get involved. Then he left me there with my thoughts, me, the delivery kid, somehow the center of this war. On my way back through the wreckage, I passed the bride huddled with her bridesmaids in what used to be cocktail hour. Her voice cut through the air. He can't even last 2 minutes in bed and then he cries. I winced. In the next room, the groom was leaning on his groomsman, drunkenly spitting his own venom. She maxed out 3 credit cards, never told me. And she's been texting her ex since the engagement. The air buzzed with betrayal, every word sharper than the last. As I lingered by the service door, the photographer approached, eyes softer than anyone else's had been all night. She pulled me aside. I've got everything, she whispered. Photos? Timestamps. Proof the cake was perfect when you delivered it. Proof of when it was damaged. My breath caught. She slipped me her business card, promising to send the shots to testify if needed. You were just caught in the middle, she said, almost apologetic. For the first time that night, someone saw me. By then, the police had wrapped their initial sweep. Cars were being freed from the lot. Catering trucks rumbled out. The limo finally moved. 3 hours. That's how long I'd been trapped in that nightmare. What should have been a quick 20-minute drop-off turned into a war zone. An officer handed me a case number, told me to document everything while it was fresh. Insurance would call, maybe lawyers too. He wished me luck, his tone made it sound like I'd need it. I sat in my van staring at the venue where people were still shouting, crying, hurling accusations through the shattered remains of their big day. The drive back took 40 minutes. Halfway down the highway, my phone buzzed again. My boss. I let it ring. And ring. And ring. 5 voicemails later, the text started, all caps. Need report immediately. I just gripped the wheel tighter, the echoes of that nightmare wedding still rattling in my head. And all I could think was, the cake survived more than the marriage ever would. By the time I finally pulled into a gas station, my nerves were frayed raw. I sat there gripping the steering wheel before forcing myself to call my boss back. He answered drunk again, voice already raised, demanding that I write up a report blaming the venue for the cake damage. He wanted me to say the staff had knocked into the cart and caused glass contamination. I told him flat out that wasn't what happened. There was a long pause on the line, then his voice dropped, sharp and cold. You better think real hard about your job security. My stomach sank. He wanted me to lie, commit fraud, basically, and hang it all on the venue. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't. When I refused, he hung up. Within minutes, 17 texts lit up my phone, all demanding that report before midnight. I drove home on autopilot, pasta heating on the stove while my head spun with the thought of losing my job. That's when my roommate shoved her phone at me. Is this you? And there I was, frozen in the background of some guest's TikTok. Me holding the cake cart while the bride shrieked at her groom. 200,000 views already. The comments were dissecting my uniform, trying to figure out which bakery I worked for. Within an hour, more angles popped up online, different guests, different videos, all going viral. Someone finally zoomed in on our logo stitched on my shirt. By the time I checked our bakery's Instagram, it was flooded with 1-star reviews. Strangers from all over the country calling us incompetent, saying we ruined weddings. At 11 p.m., my phone rang. It was my boss. Screaming. Corporate was threatening to revoke his franchise license over the social media fallout. The next morning, I woke to 14 missed calls. The county health department. The inspector's voice was brisk, no nonsense. They'd received multiple reports about glass contamination. She needed every document immediately, delivery receipts, prep logs, ingredient lists, my statement. I explained the truth. We'd only delivered the cake, and I had time-stamped photos showing it intact when I left. She still had to investigate since our business was named in the complaints. While I gathered the paperwork, my boss called again. This time he was livid, yelling that the disaster was all my fault because I hadn't abandoned the venue the second things turned ugly. Any delivery driver with sense would have left. He shouted. I reminded him he was the one who begged me to make sure the delivery was flawless because the couple was lawsuit happy. He snapped back, that doesn't mean you stay 3 hours. You let it get out of hand. That afternoon, the inspector showed up at the bakery. Clipboard in hand, sharp eyes sweeping the kitchen. She immediately had us throw out 3 sheet cakes cooling on racks, said they might have been exposed to glass. Never mind that the glass broke 20 feet away at the venue. That was $200 in ingredients gone plus labor. My boss trailed behind her, pleading, insisting nothing was contaminated. She didn't budge. At one point he pulled me aside, voice low, eyes darting. Tell her you never saw any glass near the cake. Just deny it. But when she asked me directly, I told the truth. I told her about the champagne glass shattering and how I'd picked shards off the table with tweezers to protect the cake. My boss's face turned the color of raw steak. He stormed into his office and slammed the door so hard the inspector wrote him up for unprofessional conduct. When she turned back to me, her voice softened. She thanked me for being honest, said my precautions actually helped our case. That evening I got an email from the venue coordinator. She wanted a written statement about what I'd witnessed. But her wording was strategic. She wanted me to emphasize the chaos of the bride and groom and downplay any venue responsibility. Basically, she was asking me to throw the wedding couple under the bus. But attached was my signed delivery form, her own signature confirming the cake had arrived on time and intact. That was gold. Exactly what I needed. I wrote back saying I'd provide an honest statement and that I'd be noting she'd signed off without complaints. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived. The bride and groom's lawyer. My hands shook as I opened it. They were claiming we delivered late. A lie. I had time-stamped photos and receipts to prove otherwise. They also said the roses were the wrong shade of pink, which was absurd. They'd approved the design. Their demand? A full refund of $800 plus $5,000 for emotional distress. My boss hurled the letter at me, sneering that I should pay it myself since I'd caused all this trouble. Our insurance company assigned an adjuster who called me directly. She wanted everything. Every photo, every text, every scrap of paper from that day. I sent it all. Timestamps, the signed delivery form, my desperate text to my boss, the police report number. She sounded impressed. This is excellent documentation. It's clear you fulfilled the contract. But it'll take weeks. My boss didn't care. He punished me anyway, cut my hours in half. Can't afford full-time employees who cause legal problems, he said smugly. I needed the money, so I had to swallow it and keep showing up. 2 days into my reduced schedule, I got an email from the photographer. She'd uploaded the professional photos. Hundreds of them. She thought I might need them for legal defense. I clicked through the images, the cake pristine and flawless on the table, time-stamped, exactly what the couple ordered. Then came the shots after, the groom stumbling, the champagne bottle tipping, the bottom tier smeared with liquid and frosting knocked loose. The whole accident caught in the corner of her dance floor shots. I forwarded everything straight to the insurance adjuster. Within an hour, she called back. This is it. These are the photos we needed. They proved the cake was perfect at delivery. The damage happened after. You're covered. A week later, the insurance company announced they'd offer the couple a settlement, less than their demand, but enough to avoid a lawsuit. My boss called me into his office, waving the letter like a weapon. We still have to pay the $1,000 deductible. Because of your incompetence. I tried to protest, the photos proved otherwise, but he cut me off, shoving a paper at me. He said he'd be taking $50 out of every paycheck until the deductible was covered. With my hours cut, that meant 5 months of punishment. I signed it. Because I needed the paycheck. But inside I knew this job was already over. And all I could think was I'd survived the worst wedding in history, but I might not survive this boss. The very next morning, the health department showed up at our bakery. Word had spread on social media that there'd been glass in the wedding cake. I could feel my stomach flip as the inspector walked in, clipboard in hand. She spent 3 hours combing through our kitchen, checking every corner, reviewing every single procedure. She didn't find anything tied to the wedding itself, but she did write us up for a handful of minor violations, stuff like labeling issues and storage practices. Nothing that would normally shut us down, but still, it all went on record. That's when it hit me, my boss taking money out of my paycheck for the deductible? That didn't add up. Not legally, not ethically. The photographer's evidence proved beyond a doubt that the bakery hadn't done anything wrong. And yet here I was, the only one paying the price for telling the truth instead of covering his lie. We got an official warning letter but kept our license. The inspector even said we were lucky, though her eyes made it clear she meant we were skating on thin ice. She ordered us to implement stricter delivery protocols immediately. Suddenly, every delivery came with a checklist that added half an hour to even the simplest orders. We had to snap photos at every stage, collect signatures at multiple points, and document the condition of the venue before setup. What used to be a quick drop-off had turned into a bureaucratic nightmare. 3 weeks later, the wedding videos finally stopped trending online. But the damage was already done. Our reviews tanked from 4.5 stars to barely 2. Loyal customers started ghosting us. Mrs. Yardy, who'd ordered a cake every month for her grandkids, never called again. The coffee shop that bought pastries twice a week switched to another supplier. And my boss? Every cancellation was somehow my fault. He'd mutter under his breath whenever I walked by, one person, 20 years of reputation gone. He stopped making eye contact. Wouldn't even stay in the same room with me. The other staff felt it too. They kept their heads down, refusing to get caught in the tension. One decorator whispered that she was sorry but couldn't risk taking sides. Orders slowed to a trickle, but my hours stayed cut in half while everyone else kept their full schedules. Then, for weeks after that cursed wedding, the lawyer called with unexpected news. The couple was divorcing. Their attorneys suddenly had bigger battles than a cake. The bride's lawyer sent a notice they were dropping the case against us. Turns out the bride and groom couldn't even agree on whether to pursue it anymore. When my boss heard, he actually smiled for the first time in weeks. But he didn't restore my hours. That same afternoon, an email pinged into my inbox. It was from the venue coordinator. She thanked me for staying professional through what she called the most insane wedding she'd seen in 30 years. She said she'd worked long enough to know when someone was being scapegoated. She even offered to be a reference for me and mentioned she had contacts at several catering companies. That was my sign. I started applying everywhere. 15 applications in a week. Most ghosted me. 2 called for interviews but dropped me as soon as they Googled my name and found the viral videos. The third? A corporate catering company that served office towers and big events. The manager looked me straight in the eye during the interview and said, "I saw the videos." My heart sank. But then she added, "The fact you still set up that cake perfectly in that chaos? Impressive." She asked me to tell my side. I did. She listened. And then she offered me the job on the spot. Better pay, real benefits, the works. Their training blew me away. Deliveries were done in pairs for big orders. Every truck had cameras. Every client signed off with timestamps. They even had a legal team on retainer for clients who liked to stir trouble. After what I'd been through, it felt like stepping into another world. My last week at the bakery dragged. On Thursday, my boss finally broke the silence. He leaned in the doorway of the break room, looking older than I'd ever seen him. He said maybe he shouldn't have sent me alone on such an important delivery. Said he'd been stressed about money, made a bad call. It was too little, too late. I just nodded and went back to loading the van for my final run. My new job started that Monday. For the first time in months, I felt safe. Supported. 6 months later, I ran into the venue coordinator again downtown. We grabbed coffee and she told me how that nightmare wedding had reshaped their policies. She pulled out her phone and showed me their new contract language, highlighted in yellow. Asterisk, no vendor shall enter premises during domestic altercation. Asterisk. I couldn't help laughing. Honestly, it made sense. She leaned in closer, voice dropping. The bride had tried to sue everyone, the venue, the DJ, the florist, even the photographer. None of the lawsuits went anywhere. Guests had captured hours of footage showing the bride and groom starting every single fight themselves. The judge tossed the cases and ordered them to pay court costs. Right then, my phone buzzed. A text from my old boss, asterisk, want your job back? I'll give you a raise. Asterisk, I laughed out loud. Texted him back that I had a better job now, and reminded him he still owed me $300 from the deductible he'd stolen out of my checks. He never replied. The catering company wasn't as cozy as the bakery, but everything ran smoothly. No drama, no screaming brides, no champagne bottles flying. Just business lunches and office parties. I started sleeping again. Sometimes I'd check the bakery's reviews, curiosity gnawing at me. They never recovered. Complaints piled up, late orders, wrong items. Their rating kept sinking. A part of me felt bad, but then I'd remember how my boss had thrown me under the bus. At the catering company, one afternoon in the break room, people were swapping worst delivery stories. When it was my turn, I told them mine. They laughed, thought I was exaggerating, until I pulled up the viral videos and news articles. Their jaws hit the floor. One coworker asked if I ever figured out what sparked it all. I shrugged. The personal trainer. The secretary. The secrets. But truthfully, that couple was a ticking time bomb. What I learned was more important. Document everything, never let someone else rewrite your story, and know when it's time to walk away from a toxic job. The wedding from hell pushed me out of a sinking bakery and into a stable career. And just last week, my old boss texted again, but this time it wasn't to beg me back. The bakery was shutting down for good. Reading that, I realized that disaster wedding hadn't ruined me. It had saved me. Thanks for watching. Today's train wreck is over, but tomorrow's ride is already on track. Subscribe so you don't miss it.